Hi, my name's Declan Goodman, and I'm the host of the Digital Mythology podcast. Welcome. I'm very excited about this podcast. I've been in IT tech for too many years. You can tell by the grey hair. I am very excited to start this podcast. It's about, in my view, digital transformation is difficult. It's hard work, and a lot of money spent on it. But what, in my view, there hasn't been enough investment on is telling the story. Everybody loves a good story. Everybody needs a story they can connect with, they can feel. Everybody needs to be able to identify with a good story. And that's what I'm here to do in this podcast, to help you use tips and tricks from ancient mythology, from modern day approaches to digital tech, to win the hearts and minds of your stakeholders, to use metaphors so that you can gain understanding, and to ignite their passion and interest in what you're doing so you win stakeholder buy-in and you can be overall more successful. I will be inviting guests onto the podcast. I want to hear from people's experience in this space, and I'm very excited to be able to do this with my audience and to talk through tips and tricks on how to make things overall more successful for you. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, digital mythology. I invented this podcast because I'm very passionate about using tools and stories and storytelling techniques and mythology from the past and bringing those into this whole territory of digital transformation. I would say most people, what I talked to when I told them about I wanted to start this podcast, the first question was, what's mythology got to do with digital? And I'm not a mythologist. I'm certainly not a great historian, but I've always had an interest in this field. I'm not sure if you may be familiar with the likes of Joseph Campbell, these kind of leaders in the mythology space. I very much have listened to his work, and I found very often that from coming from a client site and they were talking about an ERP replacement or going from best of breed to best of suite, or they were talking about how to, streamline business processes using automation, workflows. I wouldn't be thinking about the technical side. I'd be thinking about, what ancient myth or what storytelling technique can be used here to better explain these things and to get better buy-in. So mythology is about, in my view, when I talk about, when I try to express to people why this podcast is important to me, it's important because I think a lot of digital professionals like yourself, or if you're a non-technical person, but you will always, at most, as a professional, have some contact with digital. I just think that there's a whole rich opportunity here to do tech better and to do digital better if we just take a step back and say, are we telling the story properly? Can we use metaphors? Can we use shin, which is not the shin on your leg, it's a different shin, talk to that in a moment. Or can we use inspiring narrative to demystify what we're trying to do technically and bring it into a real heartfelt story? And there's a lot of literature, you might even see it online a lot, the storytelling frameworks, there's storytelling frameworks out there and tools, and you can pay for storytelling coaches to come in and help you. And what I'd say is they're all very helpful. What I decided to do was focus on the storytelling and the narrative for just tech. I know tech well, and I know where there's lots of opportunity to sell and get tech buy-in better. I know a lot about the different industries. I know what works and doesn't work at the executive table. I'm aware also that it's becoming more and more fast-paced, the world we live in. So I might just give you a few examples. And this is where it started about, I'd say about 4 or 5 years ago. I was moving around and I was going from client to client, and I just kind of came up with this concept that, there's often when we talk about technical digital challenges, we don't tell it well. So let me give you an example. Mythology. It's pretty profound, archetypal, but there's this very human shared myth around life and death. And none of us can escape death or taxes. I won't go into the tax one, but death is a reality. But when you look at different mythologies around the world, they often treat death very commonly. And again, you can read about this. It's very interesting. But death is a very life-giving thing, and it's a very enabling concept. And if you go further on that, you think about a garden. Sometimes you have to remove large, withering, old trees and shrubbery to make way for the new. I think, obviously, from a human perspective, we all know that our from ancient beliefs that the older we get, and we're all on the same journey really. But the older we get, the more we realise that our time has come. We then withdraw and we let the younger generation come in. Technology is no different. In fact, if you look at technology, a lot of the major transformation opportunities are technical debt remediation, for example, or decommissioning or getting off old kit. I would say if you're a digital leader, if I speak about it statistically, I would say if you want a good digital program of change, you should have a lot of death planned. You got to get rid of the old. You should be decommissioning or retiring what's legacy. That's a given. But I don't just mean what's legacy from 20, 30 years ago. You need to start looking at this from a 5-year life cycle. So embracing that myth of death gives way for life, you can see, for me, it was very natural to start using this terminology when we were talking about technical debt remediation with stakeholders. So, to make room for the new, something has to give. And it's a real opportunity too, because often, the legacy heavy systems can weigh us down, and we can start investing in all sorts of other new systems coming in, but you still never really get away from that old chestnut, right? The old legacy ERP is still haunting you at 3 a.m. when it's a full moon and it's coming back to remind you that you've invested in all this new tech around the edges, but your core platform is still struggling. So there's an example of how thinking about things mythologically can actually help you get a better understanding, I have found, with clients, with stakeholders, of how to understand digital terms. Another one I'd like to just share, and again, as the audience of this podcast, I'd really welcome you to comment and share some of your own. Another one is our connectedness. So it's not just a Buddhist concept, but there's concepts go way back into mythology about we're all connected. And we're not just connected to ourselves, to each other, to other humans, but we're connected to nature, connected to the sun, waking up in the morning. There's a whole ecosystem we all thrive in. Now, unfortunately, with modern digital times, there's something called the mobile phone and digital screen getting in the way, but that's for another discussion maybe. But really, this is another example where ecosystem, connectedness, what I would call synergy, seamless harmony. These are really deep, fundamental myths from the past that still resonate today at a human level. You don't have to spend much time on social media to hear about people saying, we have to reconnect. We have to get back to nature. We have to get back to that harmonious relationship with what's around us. And again, for me in tech, it's no different, right? We have very complex, diverse ecosystems. A lot of them are inherited. We have data moving everywhere. Spaghetti junction between systems. We have a lot of nowadays, yes, we have nice things like APIs and interconnected intermediate platforms, orchestration, etc., to help. But ecosystem itself is very much more and more sensitive to change. So show me a digital system that works in isolation. You're not going to find many. Show me a digital system that doesn't have some kind of dependency on an upstream or downstream system. And why I'm bringing this up is that connectedness is very much, and as I said, I come from strategy and architecture background. Architects 101, they're all about decoupling. And I would call it desensitizing your systems. But at the same time, we need them to work together more. So it's a bit of a paradox. We need systems to work more harmoniously together in our landscape, more efficiently. We need the data moving between them to get there fast. And we need to have a way of looking at all of this ecosystem with different panes of glass, different lenses. So for example, we want a customer view of our enterprise, or we want a customer experience to be seamless. You can only do that when you go back to the ancient myth of we want connectedness. We need things to be harmonious. Everything from the customer's initiation with your organization, however they do that, most likely digital, through an app, to how it goes from front-end systems, triaging, CRM systems, all the way back through to your operational systems, back over to your reporting, looping back in. That requires an ecosystem that's harmonious. So that's another example where often in digital transformation, digital leaders are talking about, the usual things you do to enhance your ecosystem, to enhance interdependency, to streamline processes, to make data more readily available, etc. All of these things come back to me to that example of that myth, which is connectedness, restoring connectedness. And, when you think about it philosophically like that, again, this is why I started this podcast, because I think it takes people out of the domain of the complex, of the logical, of the forms, if you will. And it makes them go back to the why. Why do we need these customer experience driven architectures? Why do we need data and analytics to be, how can AI help with some of these things? These holds are all about that ecosystem and being more harmonious. I guess the third one I'd like to share, and again, I could talk all day about this, which hopefully most of you will want to do as well, and share with me. The third one is really about change, right? So it's an ancient myth again that change is constant. Can't get away from it. It's the only, I guess, constant there is. And again, if you go back to ancient myths from all indigenous tribes, they have always had this expectation that nothing's constant, and that even ourselves have to change as well. And when it comes to technology, change is the name of the game. We can hardly keep up with what vendors are doing to keeping across where's the consumer and where's your customer. What are their digital expectations going to be? And the one thing you can absolutely assume is it's going to change. So that's why when I talk to clients about their digital transformation journey, embracing this myth of change is constant really means that you should start, gone is the day of having a 10-year digital strategy, even 7 years. I'm not saying don't have one, work away, but it's going to be out of date in the next 2-3 years. Parts of it. Even if you're a heavyweight organization and you have a lot of, large systems, heavyweights, at the end of the day, it won't be able to look like it is in 7-8 years from now. I mean, this is the change we have to embrace. And that puts pressure on the fact that, often internally as an organization, you might have a planning cycle. Remember, I mentioned earlier about digital capability. It's an area I work in as well. So tech is one thing, and getting your stakeholders involved, but internal capabilities. So if you're going to be embracing the myth of change is constant, you're going to have to start applying a more agile, shorter cycle for planning. That's everything from your capital planning to, when do we look at technology refreshes, to, how often should we be reviewing our enterprise architecture roadmap. This all has to be done more frequently. And that's a challenge because stakeholders in the business often are not always used to moving that fast. But if they are, what will happen is they want to move faster maybe than your strategy allows. So then they go and they get their own systems. They go to vendors, and the business engage suppliers to bring in their own solutions, which can then lead to more complexity. So there's just a couple of examples where there's lots of, it's back to my story in the beginning, was my brother used to work on the boats. I didn't have to know anything about how fitter turning, welding, how all that works. What helped me connect in with his story, with what he was doing. And really the purpose of this podcast is to help you get yourself or your stakeholders or your team or the various people you're dealing with, you're working with, just to get them connected into what this whole digital transformation is about.